Hi, my name is DeDominicis. I'm a professor of political science here at the Catholic University of Korea in Bucheon, South Korea, a part of the Greater Seoul area. And this is a video presentation to accompany my PDF poster that I'm providing for the conference on 29th Conference on Learning, which I'm only attending online. So I have a PDF file, as I already mentioned, posted as a poster. So I'm going to share the screen with that and present that file to you so that as sort of the outline to follow. So let me open up, do the share screen. Okay, so there you can see the PDF poster that I've put up for this conference, and the proposal name is changed a bit. I should say the presentation name has changed a bit because since I've submitted the proposal several months ago, it's developed and evolved, and it's been provisionally accepted for publication somewhere under a different title. And so the title is now, as you can see, it's called the Transnational Social Identity, Web3 Hegemony and Anonymity, the Transnational Social Identity Dynamics of Globalized National Political Economic Interdependency. And my interest was in this topic, of course, is related to education in line with the conference theme, in that I am also teaching methodology in international studies. I'm a professor of political science, but I teach in the international studies department. We don't have a political science department, and we have economists and political scientists, and in the past we had anthropologists in the class, and it's my small department here. And I've been assigned to teach the methodology in international studies course, and of course, the course was just given to me as an assignment with a title, and I was left to fill in the blanks in terms of the content, which is a nice aspect of working here. And I decided that I would teach it from a perspective of the international multicultural business environment, because that's the interest of most of our students, is that they're going to get a degree in international studies, and the overwhelming majority are going to end up in the private sector. So, and of course, here in South Korea, with the economy overwhelmingly dependent upon international trade and commerce, and globalization being the byword of the collective strategy of this entire country, to focus on the cultural studies from the point of view of professional business interaction. So I use Cresswell and Poth is the book that I use to teach qualitative methodology, which some of you might be familiar with. I'm looking for my copy of that book here. Yeah, this is the Cresswell and Poth textbook that I use. It's been translated into Korean, so it's obviously known in Korea as an introductory textbook for doing qualitative research analysis. And I have the students do a small research project on international study students here in Korea, and the challenges they face in adapting here as they stay for a semester or a year. And the other book that I use from the international business perspective is this book, Writing the Ways of Culture, which is known as 4th edition by Trompenars and Hampton Turner. And the latest edition was published at the beginning of the pandemic. So it's not covering the pandemic, but it's been modified quite a bit since the 3rd edition. But that book by Trompenars and Hampton Turner has a nice introduction to the notion of values and norms, and how to define them, and how are these concepts useful for understanding international communication and international management, with a chief or an administrator having to oversee a multicultural international unit of some sort, and the challenges and of miscommunication and that can emerge, that can inhibit efficiency and effectiveness in responding to changing market conditions. So that's the context for my consideration of topics like, for example, digital globalization, and that's of course a theme also in this Writing the Ways of Culture textbook that I just showed you, digital globalization, going digital. And of course, this is a very timely topic insofar as the development of the Web3 and cryptocurrencies as part of that has been a big focus of the international business media reporting in the New York Times, and trying to relate this from the point of view of my interest in nationalism and the role of the state, because I'm a political science person, so I'm interested in international relations and the politics of international relations and state evolution, state building, and the relationship of nations to state, nationalism. So that's been my ongoing efforts to try to conceptualize what is the relationship of nation to state. We know that they're very closely related, but they're not the same, right? That nation and state are related topics, but they are not very closely related, obviously, but they're not the same. So trying to conceptualize that relationship has been my general interest over the last number of years in trying to think through these points, utilizing a framework developed by Martha and Richard W. Cottam called explained in their book from 20 years ago, Nationalism and Politics, the Political Behavior of Nation States, where they take a political psychological approach, in-group versus out-group approach towards explaining nationalism, borrowing from social identity theory. And social identity theory is associated with Henri Tajfel, his work published, I think, in the early 1970s, and then, but with various co-authors, Turner and Tajfel and so on the social categorization and individual identity, and individuals' predisposition to engage in social categorization of self versus other, to form in-groups versus out-groups, and to comparatively evaluate the status of those respective groups to other groups. And if they feel a negative evaluation, if they perceive that their group has a negative status comparison, that they respond in very strategic forms of behavior, including social competition or social mobility, try to join the outgroup by leaving the in-group and assimilating into the outgroup through individual social mobility. Social creativity involves changing the evaluation context that produces a negative self-evaluation by shifting one's self-identification with other values to say, well, our group might not be so great at working, but we're good at fighting. And that, of course, I'm drawing that from Slobodan Milosevic over 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, when I was teaching at the American University in Bulgaria, made an infamous speech in which he was talking about Serbs in comparisons with Slovenes, and saying we might not know how to work, because the Slovenes are stereotyped as being industrious and hardworking and money-oriented, but we know how to fight, which was, of course, also instigated further the Slovene perception of threat from Serbia because of the barbarian stereotype that implies. So yeah, the Cottam and Cottam book on nationalism and politics applies that social identity theory and then it develops it further with the introduction of systematic predispositions towards stereotyping of self versus other. And of course, there are certain patterns that you can predict, and barbarian stereotype is one such pattern. How I stereotype a group that I see as having a threat, posing a threat to me, but having inferior culture with superior power capabilities. For example, how Ukrainian nationalists are stereotyping the Russians, for example, as what they openly refer to them as orcs, and Russia as Mordor, if you follow the rhetoric. Or if I perceive a threat from an adversary that I see as roughly equal in capability and culture, then I'm going to predisposed to engage in the enemy stereotype, the diabolical enemy stereotype. And of course, Ronald Reagan gave his evil empire speech almost 40 years ago in 1983, in which that pretty much corresponds with that evil empire image of the Soviet Union. And Hitler's stereotype perceived opportunity in the outside world in seeing it as degenerate, that the outside adversaries, regardless of their innate size and capabilities, they lack the will and determination Germany under Hitler's regime supposedly had to do what needs to be done. And that was Germany's overwhelming advantage. And of course, these stereotypes are wrong. Of course, stereotypes lead to disasters. And but it's a human predisposition to engage in this kind of stereotyping. So I've tried to apply the Turner, Trompenaars and Hampton Turner text, we'll just say Trompenaars framework, to understanding commodification and stereotyping, or stereotyping as the basis of commodification for institutionalization and control. And understanding the emergence of the nation state, its tremendous power capabilities, including its predisposition towards stereotyping and disasters, as we saw, we're seeing today in Russia towards Ukraine and in the past, that nation states have a power mobilization advantage over non-nation states, like multinational states like the old Soviet Union or the old Yugoslavia, or multi-ethnic states like the post-colonial states of Asia and Africa, with relatively arbitrary boundaries, encompassing a diverse array of cultural groups. When we stereotype those cultural groups negatively, we call them tribes in Africa, for example, and versus nation states, like states in which the overwhelming majority of people living within the boundaries of the territorial boundaries of the state believe themselves to belong to the same primary terminal self-identity community, the nation. So Germany is pretty much a nation state. So is the United States, China, Russia, Poland after World War II, after mass murder and population exchanges and ethnic cleansing and so on. Japan is a nation state, but of course there are states that are not nation states in the world. China is a nation state, pretty much. The ideal typical is like Norway or Japan or post World War II Poland, right? Ideal typical models, but nation states also have a predisposition to have regimes that are with authorities that are more adept at controlling and maintaining control over the polity through manipulation of symbols and romantic symbols of self versus other. And this takes a more polity approach rather than just a government approach, but a polity approach, including the economic interests within the state. In the United States, we make obviously a division between the public and private sphere, of course, but that private sphere is obviously very much important part of the control system in the social formation, as Marxists call these polities on the American polity, right? Gramscian hegemony, that's been a focus of my work, trying to understand Gramscian hegemony, work of Antonio Gramsci in terms of the creation of hegemonic control over society so that marginalized and exploited groups, classes within society do not perceive their objective class interests, so-called objective class interests. Why does that happen? How are they, for lack of a better but very colorful term, brainwashed? That's what Gramscian hegemony is all about. How do the authorities persuade the people that if they are poor, it's their fault? It's because they're bad. That's why you're poor, because you don't work hard enough. You're lazy. And if somebody who's wealthy and powerful, they deserve to be in power because they're wealthy and powerful. How do you create that? That's Gramscian hegemony topic. So that's been a focus of my work and in my efforts at writing these last few years. And then I wanted to try to apply this to the development of a global polity in the form of the Web3 and digital globalization, and particularly the phenomenon of cryptocurrencies, and try to explain their emergence, while again applying these notions of nationalism, social identity theory, and stereotyping, and hegemony and law. All of this being brought together to try to explain these processes of the emergence of globalization, and the role of status and acquisition of status that is driving individual and group behavior, while building a global political and economic system on the foundations of the existing states. So, the most clear and obvious example of this is the European Union, right? The European Union is, from a constructivist point of view, of course, it relies upon the power of the European nation states, the big ones, right, to mobilize the power capabilities to both harness nationalism and contain various aspects of nationalism that lead to stereotyping, and in Europe's history leads to fascism, authoritarian populism. But still, at the same time, from the liberal intergovernmental perspective of the one second, I'll get back to you. The liberal intergovernmental perspective on European integration, is promoted or self-identified with Andrew Moravcik's work, for example. It explores the importance of nationalism and of the liberal European nation state to associate nationalism with liberal values, and these and it's sort of a paradox, right? Because at the same time as you're trying to harness and mobilize nationalism to integrate, to create a single market. Right, a tremendous amount of work, time, and effort is involved over many, many years to try to mobilize these nation states to integrate their economic systems, which is the 80% of European Union law revolves this effort to try to harmonize diverse policies and procedures to create a European single market with free movement of goods, services, labor, and capital. And of course, the negative consequences of that include populist reactionary nationalism against migration, right? Xenophobia, and of course that xenophobic reaction is the dark side, of course, of nationalism. And of course, it was played an important role in the Brexit outcome that we saw in the United Kingdom, and it's a challenge elsewhere. But of course now, and this is a topic for a different paper, right? We see that nationalists again mobilizing in Europe against the common enemy, a perceived common enemy, right? Russia, with the enemy of my enemy is my friend, summarizes this cognitive, social, psychological tendency that human beings have to stereotype, including positive stereotypes like ally. So, the condemnations of Polish authoritarian, quasi-authoritarian moves to quash the independence of the judiciary and laws, forbidding gay marriage and so on in various Polish localities. That's all become secondary issues now that the bigger challenge of Russia with its invasion of Ukraine is overwhelmed that. So. But to go back to the Web3, of course, the Web3 and cryptocurrencies have been typically associated with corruption, right? When the reporting in the New York Times that emerged highlighted how this was considered part of the dark web for people to avoid, to engage in money laundering. And of course, I cover in the paper how, some very large percentage of the total global economy is tied up with gray and black economy, right? Including money laundering. And of course, the Panama and Paradise and papers and the other Panama, Paradise, and Pandora's papers, right? Have highlighted the extent to which all this money laundering is happening, including by authority figures like the King of Jordan and America's friends, as well as America's adversaries, the Russian oligarchs, and so on, all engage in this. It's just that, of course, the United States tends to view its side as the good guys and the other side as the bad guys. And so our oligarchs are good oligarchs. But, and of course, by the way, when I've done some searches in ProQuest on cryptocurrency, I was struck when I checked a few months ago that a lot of the published articles on this are coming out of the Middle East. Which, given the importance of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and others in the political economy in the area, is interesting and I think noteworthy. But of course the value of anonymity, right? That the cryptocurrencies are transparent but anonymous, so they appeal to these interests of emerging global interests that are skeptical or challenging of the hegemony of nation states like the United States and others. That while at the same time, they're still building upon the political system and political economic global system that the United States and its allies and adversaries have created. And so and of course, the status aspects of this are evident through American hegemony insofar, for example, like art acquisition as an investment. Non-fungible tokens in the digital area is a manifestation of these orientations towards owning something that gives you high status globally, and that's noted and recognized in terms of social achievement, social mobility globally. When of course, we all remember when the Saudi family, the royal families of the Persian Gulf were purchased that Da Vinci Old Master painting for $500 million, right? These are evidence of the emergence of a global polity and American hegemony. And cryptocurrency reflects that orientation towards exploiting and building and constructing a global political economy on the foundation of the nation states and the primitive but very powerful international legal system, but primitive international legal system to regulate this that has emerged. And to explain this as an evolution on this notions of corruption and what is being corrupt and ethical and versus ethical mean in terms of perception of self versus other, that corruption is typically defined as the use of entrusted power for private gain. Well, what is public power and what is private gain becomes legitimated along with the changing authority structures of public goods that the state provides. So that's where I have to stop. And I've reached the 20-minute limit. And if you're interested, of course, I can send you a copy of the paper when the paper is published, of course, but it might be a while before it finally emerges. But you can read more on the PDF file if you're interested. So thank you. Okay, bye.